Every Sunday morning, without fail, an elderly man named Samuel Blake walked the same quiet path through Riverside Park. He wore a neatly pressed gray jacket, a simple cap, and always carried a small bouquet of purple dahlias. His steps were slow but steady, guided by routine and memory. At exactly 8:15 a.m., Samuel would reach a worn wooden bench overlooking the pond. He would sit, place the flowers gently on the seat beside him, and remain there, silent, still, for nearly 2 hours. No phone, no book, just him, the flowers, and the quiet ripple of water nearby. People in the neighborhood began to notice him, especially those who walked their dogs or jogged regularly. Some gave him a polite nod. A few whispered theories among themselves. Maybe he's waiting for someone who never shows up. Probably honoring his late wife. He must have been a romantic or a soldier. But no one ever asked. Children were curious, of course. One in particular, Leo, a bright and observant boy of 10, would watch from a distance every week. His mother, who ran a bakery across the street, once said, "That man's been bringing flowers here since you were in preschool." And yet, Leo noticed something different. Samuel never looked sad. His eyes didn't carry the heaviness of grief, at least not in the way Leo imagined loss. Instead, the old man's gaze was calm, steady, as if he wasn't mourning someone, but remembering them. One Sunday, Leo finally got close enough to see the flowers clearly. They weren't roses, as he had guessed. They were dahlias, always the same shade of violet. He looked it up later and read, "Dahlias represent eternal commitment and kindness that lasts through time." The boy's curiosity grew. One Sunday, it rained hard. Most park-goers stayed indoors, but Samuel showed up, soaked to the knees, umbrella in one hand and bouquet in the other. He placed the flowers down like always and sat through the storm in silence. Leo watched from the bakery window, something tightening in his chest. He didn't know who the flowers were for, or why Samuel came, but he suddenly understood something more important. This wasn't a habit. It was a promise. And someday soon the truth behind those flowers, behind the man who brought them, would change how everyone saw him forever. The following week, Leo couldn't hold his curiosity in any longer. He waited until the man had sat down on the bench, placed his dahlias beside him, and settled into his usual quiet stillness. With his heart racing just a little, Leo walked up the winding path, holding a hot cup of cocoa from his mom's bakery. As he approached, the old man turned and offered a gentle smile. "Hi," Leo said, offering the cocoa. "It's kind of cold today." Samuel blinked, surprised, but then, slowly, he accepted the cup. "Thank you, son," he said. His voice was gravelly but kind. They sat together in silence for a moment. Leo kept his eyes on the pond, trying to act casual. Then, without looking at the man, he asked the question that had burned in his mind for months. "Who are the flowers for?" There was no anger in the silence that followed. just a long pause as if Samuel were walking back through time. "They're for someone who changed my life," the old man said softly. "A boy I once knew. He loved this spot." Leo turned his head. "Was he your son?" Samuel shook his head gently. "No, not by blood, but maybe closer than that." That night, Leo told his mother everything about the flowers, the rain, the boy Samuel once knew. And soon, word spread beyond the bakery, slipping into morning conversations at the coffee shop, drifting through the grocery aisles, reaching even the local paper boy. People who had once only nodded in passing began to slow down as they passed the bench. Some stopped to look at the dahlias, others offered polite greetings. One woman brought an extra bouquet and placed it beside Samuel's, silently, before walking away. They didn't know the full story, but the mystery was no longer distant. It had become personal, like a whisper everyone wanted to hear the end of. The park staff, too, started to take notice. One of the gardeners, an older man named Jorge, who had worked the grounds for decades, told Leo's mother over coffee, "That bench? It used to be the favorite spot of a little boy, always sitting with that man. The boy had trouble hearing, but the two of them, they understood each other without saying much." The pieces began to connect. Why the old man brought the same flower. Why he never missed a Sunday. Why he stayed even in the rain. It wasn't just routine. It was memory carved into habit, love expressed in silence. The local librarian, intrigued by the rumors, dug through old community newsletters and found a photo from the 1980s. A much younger Samuel, sitting on that very bench with a boy beside him. The caption read, "Volunteer of the Year, Mr. Blake and little Eli, the soul of the community." Eli, that was the name. The story, once only guessed at, had found its first real echo. But what happened to Eli? And why had Samuel never spoken of him until now? The town leaned in, and the next Sunday more people than ever came to the park, not to ask, but simply to be there. Something was unfolding, and it felt sacred. That Sunday, when Samuel Blake arrived at the park, he was not alone. The bench, once his quiet sanctuary, now had people standing respectfully at a distance. Some held flowers of their own. Others just watched, uncertain of what to say, but all feeling something in their chest they couldn't quite explain. Samuel noticed the crowd, paused, then slowly approached the bench. As he placed the purple dahlias down like always, a young woman stepped forward and gently asked, "Mr. Blake, was his name Eli?" Samuel blinked. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in decades. "How do you know that?" he asked softly. She showed him the photo, copied from the library archives. "I think people would like to know," she said, "if you're willing to tell them." He looked out at the pond, as he always did. The sun shimmered across the surface. Birds darted low near the water. And for the first time in years, Samuel nodded. "I met Eli when I was volunteering at the Southbridge Children's Home," he began. "He was 8, couldn't hear much, born with partial hearing loss. A lot of people thought he was difficult, but he was just misunderstood. People gathered closer. No one interrupted. "I wasn't much of a teacher," Samuel said, chuckling softly. "I'd never raised a child. I didn't even think I was very good with them. But Eli didn't need loud voices. He needed presence. So I came every week. We fed the ducks, sat right here on this bench, and watched the world go by. He liked purple dahlias, said he liked their smell, one of the few things he could still sense clearly." Someone in the crowd wiped away a tear. Samuel continued, "One day I came, and he was gone. They said a family had adopted him across the country. No goodbye. No contact. That was hard. But I was happy for him. Or tried to be." He paused, voice trembling now. 3 months later, I got a letter. There'd been an accident. A fire. The family didn't make it. Eli didn't make it. Gasps spread quietly among the listeners. I came here that Sunday, and I never stopped. This was our place, and those flowers. He nodded to the dahlias beside him. They were for him, not out of grief, but to keep a promise. "A promise?" someone asked softly. Samuel smiled through his tears. "I told him once, as long as I'm breathing, I'll sit with you every Sunday, even if only in spirit." The silence that followed was reverent. A young father reached for his son's hand. An older couple leaned into each other. Leo, standing near the front, felt his throat tighten, not because it was sad, but because it was real. And love that real leaves a mark. After a moment, someone placed a second bouquet of dahlias on the bench. Then another, and another. By the time Samuel left the park that day, the bench was covered in purple. He looked back once before walking away, whispering something that only the wind could carry. "You're still here, Eli." From that Sunday forward, everything changed. No one ever looked at that bench the same way again. And the man they once thought of as just a quiet old man with flowers became a symbol of loyalty, of gentle love, and of how deep the bond between two souls could go even without blood, even after goodbye. By the following week, the bench by the pond had transformed. A small bronze plaque had been quietly installed by the city's Parks Department. It read, "In memory of Eli, beloved by one, remembered by many." No ceremony had been scheduled. No announcement was made. But when Samuel arrived that Sunday morning, he stopped short. For a long while he just stood there, staring at the plaque, his hands trembling around the stems of the dahlias. He slowly sat down, tears forming in his eyes, not from sorrow, but from something else, something deeper, gratitude, closure. And he wasn't alone. That morning, more than 20 people gathered at a respectful distance, many of them holding purple flowers. No one spoke over him. They just stood by quietly, breathing in the same morning air, letting the stillness speak. Samuel didn't say much that day. He simply looked around at the faces, some familiar, some not, and nodded. Leo sat beside him again. "You okay?" the boy whispered. Samuel smiled gently. "I think I finally am." News of his story had traveled beyond the neighborhood. A local journalist published an article titled "The Boy Who Wasn't Forgotten," and soon messages began pouring into the community center. Parents shared how the story changed how they spoke to their children. Teachers said they used it in class as a lesson on empathy and kindness. Even the mayor visited the park the next Sunday, placing a single dahlia on the bench without fanfare. But the most powerful impact was quieter. People started showing up for others. A retired nurse began reading every weekend at the children's ward. A lonely teen was befriended by a group of veterans who played chess in the square. A boy with autism who never spoke in public suddenly raised his hand during group reading, and when asked what changed, he simply said, "Someone finally listened." All around the neighborhood, little acts of connection began blooming, like dahlias in full spring. Leo and his mother, inspired by Samuel, created a weekly program at the bakery: coffee and a flower. Each Sunday, customers received a free small bouquet with their purchase, encouraging them to give it to someone who needed a smile. Samuel never took credit for any of it. In fact, he barely acknowledged that he'd done anything at all. He still showed up each Sunday, still brought the same flowers, still sat in silence for a while before heading home. But now, there was always someone sitting with him. Sometimes it was Leo, sometimes a mother and daughter. Sometimes someone new who had only read about Eli and wanted to understand the kind of love that lasted decades. One Sunday, a little girl asked, "Was Eli your best friend?" Samuel looked at her and said quietly, "He was my reminder that even short lives can leave long echoes." And so they did. It was a cold morning in late October when Samuel Blake didn't come. For the first time in over 30 years, the bench sat empty. No man, no flowers, just the quiet breeze rustling the amber leaves along the pond. Leo noticed first. He waited until noon, still clutching 2 cups of cocoa, but the path remained quiet. Later that afternoon, the news reached the community. Samuel Blake had passed peacefully in his sleep. No family was listed, no formal arrangements made. Just a note on his kitchen table, handwritten with care. "Don't make a fuss. Just remember him. That's enough for me." But the town couldn't let it go like that. They wouldn't. That Sunday, the park was overflowing. Dozens, then hundreds, came with purple dahlias in hand. People who had known him for years, and others who had only just learned his story. They placed flowers on the bench until it disappeared beneath a sea of violet. Leo stood near the front, reading aloud a letter he wrote for Samuel. "You sat here alone, but you weren't really alone. You gave Eli a place in the world, and you gave us all a reason to be better. I'll keep showing up, Mr. Blake, just like you did." At the end of the ceremony, silence filled the air, until a small boy, no older than Eli had been, stepped forward and gently placed a coin on the bench. No one knew where he got it, but engraved on its face were the words, "Love shows up. No statues were built, no streets renamed. But each Sunday someone still brings flowers. Sometimes it's a stranger, sometimes it's Leo, sometimes it's just the wind scattering petals across the pond. But the promise remains.
If this story touched your heart, we'd be honored to have you with us. Each day we share quiet moments that remind us what still matters. You can subscribe below to join us.